Hey guys, Youngblood with you, and today we're going to be doing our 8th installment of the Ask Youngblood Anything series, and we're going to just jump on into it, starting off with the Canadian Will saying, why do asshats keep saying boom and zoom for the Vanguard? It's a little zoom with zero boom, plus the tactic will only work for the Harbinger, not the Warden. Well, I'm one that says boom and zoom Canadian Will, so I guess I'm an asshat, but the reason people say that is because there's more to it. It's slow in SCM mode, but it's very fast in cruise mode. And if you're coming up on a target, you can utilize that really fast inbound approach, switch to SCM at the last minute, do your damage, and then go back into cruise mode and zoom off. That's kind of the plan behind it, and I think that's what it is going to really kind of work for it. Now, as far as just the Harbinger versus the Warden, you know, when we start talking about the Harbinger, yeah, it's got the rocket pods up front, which is going to be cool. It's got the railgun on it. It's also got, you know, the torpedoes to go. And those are all going to be great for boom and zoom. But if you start thinking about the Warden, they're all very focused on forward-facing weaponry. You know, you've got 4 stationary lasers up front. You've got the big rail. You got either the railgun or the minigun up front. And since they've made the adjustments to the firepower, it does a good job of dealing a lot of damage. I think it's just one of those ships that's going to continue to get tweaked, but that's what the purpose of the ship is. That's what the description of the ship is, and that's what you really need to focus on when we start talking about what the ship's going to be in the end, because that purpose that the ship was built with in mind is what they're going to kind of make the adjustments towards. Nano says, do you think the Banu Merchantman will end up having more cargo capacity when fully done compared to the Hull C? No. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think it's going to be fairly close to a point where it's at least competitive, and you also get the advantage of the Merchantman probably being faster. It gets to keep its cargo inside. It's a little bit more protected. It probably has better, you know, armament overall. I think the Banu Merchantman is a safer option, not to mention having the ability, and I think this is one of the reasons why it's going to end up having less cargo capacity, is because you're going to be able to set up shop in space and almost sell things, like almost in like a floating market, whereas the Hull C is purpose-built to take things from point A to point B. So with that in mind, I think the Hull C is going to end up being the king between those two in just pure cargo capacity. But I think the Merchantman is a much more, versatile ship that gives you better in different ways to play the cargo role. Drew Cypher says, where did your Connie go? Is that what you swapped for the Starfarer for? Yes, that's absolutely what I swapped the Starfarer for. The reason I did that was, one, because I think I was kind of having a battle in my mind of a couple different ships and what their roles were going to end up being. I may still end up moving something into a constellation because I really do like the Connie. That being said, the Starfarer I think is going to, you know, it gives you a larger cargo carrying capacity, and it also is going to kind of have that gameplay that I'm excited for about the scooping fuel. I think that freedom of being able to go out, scoop fuel, not having to pay anything up front, and then sell it for a profit, as well as being able to support operations that we're running as an organization, I think that for me provided a little bit more value. I ended up getting the Freelancer to kind of take that smaller scale cargo running type of capacity that I lost with the Constellation. Now it's a significant hit in cargo as compared to the Connie, but I can really take on a lot of different roles, choosing between the Freelancer or the Starfarer. Barra O'Machire, oh boy, sorry about that, says he has a question. Apart from the dedicated exploration ships like the Freelancer, Duracarrick, and so on, what ships do you think will eventually make good exploration ships after putting in some upgrades? I've been liking the look of the Cutlass Black as one, or the Vanguard Warden, maybe even the Retaliator. So with those, I think the Retaliator could potentially be a good explorer just because we see a lot of versatility coming in with the modules in the middle of the ship. I think the Cutlass Black is one that could be listed as a good explorer as well, especially since it kind of talks about that a little bit in some of the lore that we've gotten about the ship. I don't think it's going to be the king of exploration by any means, but I think a lot of ships could kind of be retrofitted into that role. One in the description that's talked about is the Gladiator as potentially a good civilian exploration ship. And I think that could end up being the case in the end, but it's just going to kind of depend on how that ship actually functions once you get the upgrades into it. It's a carrier-based bomber, so I don't think of that as being a long-range ship, but who knows? With the right upgrades, anything could kind of fit that role. I think we're talking about the Freelancer Dur. The stock Freelancer would be really good because you can kind of swap out the components you want to make it similar to the Dur. But I think those are the ones that kind of jump out at me. But really, I think anything could end up being an exploration ship. Well, not anything, but most things could end up being an exploration ship with the proper upgrades. Jeff Burnett says, this one's going to be an eye roller. Can you do a tutorial on landing, a thorough, well-explained one? With voicing over everything that you're doing, whether it's double tap, space break, etc. It's kind of a long question, but basically it wants to know how to land with a video. Yes, I can absolutely do that. I'll probably try and work that in next week for you. Ultimately, it's going to be looking at the keybinds for yourself because everybody kind of has them set up differently and seeing what's going to be best for you, but I can kind of walk you through the right process at least. Acer Cam says, what's your thoughts on something like a Death Star? No, not a planet crusher, but like having a super station with weapons that players could make and customize. I don't think we're going to get anything that's of the scale of the Death Star, but we are going to have player-controlled stations. Not necessarily player-owned stations, but you could take over a station and then kind of man the defenses and do whatever you want on that station. You might end up being able to make upgrades. Eventually, we might even have the player-owned stuff, but I don't think something like that's going to happen in the short term, but I think there are plans for something like that in the long term. Again, not a Death Star, but if you're talking about customizing and really arming a station, I think that's probably in the long-term plans for the game. Isaac says, when do you think the Reliant will be hangar ready or flyable? I think the Reliant is going to be hangar ready very soon. I would say probably by the end of March. I initially said by the end of February, but that was also because they said it was going to be the next hangar ready ship, and that's changed a couple times. That being said, we've gotten some sneak peeks recently of a lot of work that they've done on it. And I think that's really indicative that it's probably going to be pretty close to release. We've seen that for the Car2All, we've seen that for the Reliant, we've seen that for the Starfarer. The way I'm kind of thinking right now is that when 2.2 gets released, all three of those are probably going to end up in hangar. Chef Excellent says, can you earn the Scout in-game or is it a purchase exclusive? The GN Scout, which is the Car2All, is like every other ship in the game. It's not a purchase exclusive. You can earn everything that you can buy now in the game. Now, some of those things may be more difficult. For example, the Car2All may be a harder ship to get because it is an alien ship, but you should be able to get that. Like the Vanduul Glaive, for example, is only given to the most elite pilots of the Vanduul, so getting one of those is going to be kind of challenging. Though we do have the company Asperia who ends up making some of those for the general population. So nothing is going to be totally exclusive except for like the really, really large things like a Bengal carrier, which you can't buy now anyways, or like the Dreadnought that's going to be coming. Those are ships that are going to be military exclusives. You're not going to be able to buy them, though you are going to be able to potentially find derelicts out there that you could end up maybe capturing. Probably not the case for the Dreadnought, but it is known that there's going to be Bengal derelicts that you can go out and get. And I think even in I can't remember which system review I did at this point. I've done so many of them, but one of them there was there's a city built within a crashed Bengal carrier. So there's going to be stuff like that out there, and you're going to be able to really just earn anything that you can buy. Magnanimous says, how long do you think the ship's sale cycles are? Like, since the Vanguard sale just ended, how long do you think it'll be till it goes on sale again and other ships? There's a couple different times that ships go on sale. You've got the initial concept sale. You've got the hangar ready sale. So when a ship gets into the hangar, so when you can go tour it, it typically goes on sale again there. And then when that ship ends up being flyable, it ends up being for sale again. And typically that's when you see the non-exclusive ships end up going for sale or being permanent additions to the store. Now that doesn't always happen. Like the Vanguard, for example, you can't buy right now. The 350 you can't buy right now. There's some ships that aren't permanent additions, but you do have other opportunities. Typically they do a holiday sale, so around the Christmas time you get a sale in there, and then you also get the anniversary sale, which is typically in November, where you can end up buying whatever they have available at that point, and that's generally when you see most things that went through concept sale or were limited sales up for sale again. Commander Hawk 22 says, hey Youngblood, do you think that the larger ships like the Idris, Javelin, Orion, etc. will have specific hangars for the ships? Or what's the plan here? The larger ships that aren't going to fit in the hangars are going to have landing pads in space, or potentially outside your hangar. It just kind of depends. There's some ships that can't go in atmosphere. And how that ends up working is going to be interesting to see, because maybe on some planets you might be able to take a little shuttle down to the actual landing zone, or you might end up just taking some mythical space elevator that drops you down into the planet side. We're seeing ships like the Starfarer, for example, which is a very, very big ship. We know that they're expanding the hangar, so the hangar is getting bigger, so you can actually fit a Starfarer in there. We do know that the Idris and the Javelin are not going to actually fit within a hangar. Those are going to have to land somewhere, and that may end up being on a hangar, like on a landing pad outside or up in space. But either way, ships like that aren't going to end up in a hangar. The Orion, I'm not sure about. And last question for this video, Panama Lane says, "Hey Youngblood, congrats on the MVP." Thank you. My question is, which is better generally, to have multiple lower-sized weapons or fewer large ones? I'm very excited for the Reliant Tana to be ready soon, and seemingly we'll have a lot of good choices for configurations on the wingtips. This one is going to be about personal preference. In most situations, I think the simplest way I could say it is, if you have good, consistent aim, having fewer, larger weapons is going to do you well. If you're not as consistent in your aim, then having more smaller weapons is going to end up giving you a better chance of hitting your target, because there's more bullets and projectiles firing at the same time. Now, they're all going to go to the same pip if they're all the same weapon, but especially if you stagger weapons that are very similar but not quite the same in bullet velocity, then you kind of end up getting like I don't know, you're chucking a bunch of lead down range. And while you may not be doing as much damage, you can do more consistent damage. So I would say if you're practicing your aim and you're really good about landing shots, definitely go fewer, larger weapons. But you can end up doing a mix too. Like maybe you've got like a little spammer that's just going to try and wear down their shields while you're lining up your big gun, and then you're wanting to let that rip. Something like that does really well on like the Cutlass, for example. If you were to put a size 5 or 4 weapon on top, and everything else was like size 3s that are just kind of little pew-pew guns, you can wear down the shield or get that consistent damage until you really get that last shot lined up, and then boom, you unleash that big cannon, and then do a significant amount of damage. But I prefer larger weapons, but it's really going to be up to you and how you end up flying, because I think it's going to be different for everybody. So that's it. Again, I told you I was going to try and keep these a little bit briefer. So get your questions in if you have more. Otherwise, I appreciate you guys watching. I'll have another one out soon, and take care.